On February 14, 1943, the American 1st Armored Division under Orlando Ward endured a humiliating defeat. Alongside Free French forces, the division was forced to withdraw a staggering 50 miles to the western Dorsale Mountains near the Tunisian-Algerian border. This retreat left the door wide open for Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Sharing General George S. Patton's aggressive philosophy of relentless attack, Rommel seized the opportunity to push the Allies out of Tunisia entirely. His target, the Speba and Kasserine passes. What followed was the infamous Battle of Kasserine Pass. Rommel's forces came perilously close to breaking through the Allied lines. However, logistical nightmares, the unforgiving terrain, and the arrival of Allied reinforcements ultimately forced him to abandon the offensive on February 22nd, retreating to his fortified Mareth line. Yet despite his withdrawal, Rommel left devastation in his wake. The US II Corps, led by Lloyd Fredendall, was outmatched at every turn. More than 3,000 American troops were killed or wounded, another 3,700 captured, and a staggering 200 tanks were lost. The damage extended beyond casualties and equipment. It was the first significant American clash with the Germans, and it ended in more than defeat. It was a humiliation. The American public, previously optimistic, was rattled by the disaster, while British troops mockingly referred to their American counterparts as "our Italians," a cutting jab likening them to Mussolini's infamously ineffective forces. Patton, sitting far from the battlefield in Casablanca, seethed. The failure of the American army, his army, was a personal affront. Adding to his agony was the capture of his son-in-law, John Waters, now a German prisoner of war. The helplessness gnawed at Patton, a man built for action, not idleness. Relief came on March 4th, when Patton received orders from General Dwight D. Eisenhower to assume command of II Corps. His mission was clear: transform a battered force into a cohesive, effective fighting unit. Patton wasted no time. Flying to Algiers, he was met by Eisenhower, who minced no words. The rehabilitation of all American forces under your command was the task at hand. Eisenhower trusted Patton implicitly, but warned him,
"Your personal courage is something you do not have to prove to me, and I want you as Corps commander, not as a casualty."
Briefed by British General Sir Harold Alexander, Patton learned that the Second Corps would play a supporting role to Bernard Montgomery's British forces, threatening the Axis flank. Patton bristled at the idea of playing second fiddle, but he understood the chain of command. For now, his priority was saving II Corps from its own dysfunction. On March 6th, Patton formally took over from Fredendall and surveyed the shattered remains of the command. To Patton, the state of the men was intolerable.
The soldier is the army,
He believed. Without discipline and cohesion, there could be no victory. Patton had just 10 days to transform a demoralized force into a disciplined, battle-ready army. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Patton, clad in his trademark polished helmet and ivory-handled revolver, was everywhere, barreling through the ranks in a siren-blaring scout car flanked by motorcycle escorts. He demanded that his men look and act like soldiers. Uniforms were to be clean and pressed, complete with neckties, leggings, and helmets. Military courtesies, including the salute, were strictly enforced. "It is said," one observer remarked, "that anyone in the army could instantly recognize a Patton man by the sharpness of his salute." Weapons were overhauled, infractions punished with monetary fines, and discipline became the backbone of Second Corps. While the men grumbled at the relentless standards, they began to stand straighter, walk prouder. They were no longer a disjointed group of survivors. They were Patton's men. In fiery speeches, he exhorted them to fight not just for survival, but for victory.
"I don't want you to die for your country. I want you to make the other bastard die for his."
Patton's efforts were not just about instilling discipline. He worked tirelessly to ensure his men had the best equipment, rations and support possible. Even as he pushed them to their limits, he reminded them that they were worthy, capable, and destined to succeed. Many resented him, but none ignored him. Even the skeptics couldn't help but be drawn into his orbit. By mid-March, Patton was joined by Omar Bradley, whom Eisenhower sent as a representative. Patton suspected Bradley was there to monitor him, but turned the situation to his advantage, securing permission to make Bradley his deputy. With Bradley's support, Patton began laying the groundwork for Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily, while simultaneously preparing II Corps for its next battle. Promoted to Lieutenant General on March 12th, Patton launched II Corps into action on March 17th. General Terry Allen's division seized the village of Gafsa, then pressed toward Gabes, delivering a decisive blow at the Battle of El Gueta. Facing German and Italian panzer forces, Allen's troops repelled two major attacks, destroying 30 Axis tanks and forcing the enemy into retreat. The victory was a salve to American morale, erasing much of the sting from Kasserine Pass. Not all engagements went as smoothly. Orlando Ward's division faltered at McNassy Pass, bogged down by mud and indecision. Patton, who believed no commander should be defeated by weather or terrain, eventually relieved Ward of his duties. It was a difficult decision, but one Patton deemed necessary. Unlike his days in France during World War I, Patton could not personally oversee every battlefield. The distances between El Gueta and McNassy stretched his ability to be everywhere at once. Though he made frequent frontline inspections, much of his time was spent coordinating from headquarters, a source of personal frustration. As Montgomery's forces drove the Germans from the Marath line, Alexander ordered Patton to shift focus, pulling out of McNassy to pursue the retreating enemy toward Gabes. The overly detailed nature of Alexander's orders grated on Patton, who felt they left no room for initiative. Still, he followed orders and prepared for what he hoped would be another stunning victory. The assault, led by C.C. Benson, was hampered by delays and a lack of close air support. Patton's frustration boiled over when his aide, Captain Dick Jensen, was killed in an air attack on the general's headquarters. Furious at the total lack of air cover, Patton clashed with Air Vice Marshal Arthur Conyngham, who accused Patton of blaming the Air Force for ground failures. The tension reached a breaking point when Patton demanded a public apology. In an almost surreal twist, 3 Air Force generals arrived at Patton's headquarters to mend fences, only to find themselves under air attack. As debris rained down, Patton quipped,
"If I could find the sons of bitches who flew those planes, I'd mail each one of them a medal."
Conyngham eventually retracted his remarks, and the matter was laid to rest. Returning to the Gabes offensive, Patton found Benson's tanks stalled at a minefield. True to form, Patton led by example, driving through the mines himself in a jeep, clearing a path for the tanks. Though the gesture was risky and ultimately unnecessary, the Axis forces had already withdrawn. It was emblematic of Patton's leadership style, bold, decisive, and unrelenting. While the Gabes operation yielded limited results, the victory at El Gueta was enough to prove II Corps redemption. When Alexander initially excluded the Corps from the final Tunisian campaign, Patton protested vehemently. He had restored the unit's honor and demanded it play a role in the culmination of the campaign. Securing that promise, he handed command to Bradley and returned to Casablanca to resume planning Operation Husky. Praise for Patton's transformation of II Corps came from the highest levels. General George Marshall commended him.
"You have done a fine job and have justified our confidence in you."
Eisenhower added,
I hope that you personally will accept my sincere congratulations upon the outstanding example of leadership you have given us all.
In his diary, Patton reflected on his growth as a leader.
As I gain in experience, I do not think more of myself, but less of others. Men, even so-called great men, are wonderfully weak and timid. They are too damned polite. War is very simple, direct, and ruthless. It takes a simple, direct, and ruthless man to wage war.
Then, with characteristic self-awareness, he added,
Sometimes I wonder if I will have to laugh at myself for writing things like the above, but I think not.
With II Corps restored, Patton turned his attention to the challenges ahead. The war was far from over, and for Patton, that was precisely how he preferred it. For more secret stories of cunning, endurance, and iron resolve, subscribe to The Shadows and the Past.